Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Day of the Jackal event, in which Jakal the Guardian is added to the game. So let's get into that. As far as this troop, it is an epic, so it comes in with a lot of blue, purple arcanes, only 200 each, so great time to be stocking up on them. As far as the troop itself, it is a viable potion spammer. Big issue with this is its lack of guarantee extra turn compared to something like the flask that we got the other week. However, as far as what it does, it def marks a random enemy and then creates 1 to 3 blue mana potions. If the enemy is frozen, there's a 50% chance it will gain an extra turn. So this is a double conditional extra turn in the sense that not only do they have to be the condition of frozen, but also even if they are frozen, it's only a 50-50 chance that it does end up doing so. Though of course, if you do have something like a Frost Mage hero class or something similar where you start with freeze and constantly keep freezing, that alone, combined with some kind of weapon, is likely enough to perpetuate the freeze. However, of course, even in that situation, it is still just a 50-50, and the chance that 1 to 3 blues are going to land an extra turn on their own, very unlikely. So sometimes it could be very bad and just end up doing 1 single potion and maybe not even an extra turn, or it could be really bad and create 3, but however, not land an extra turn, and then the enemy just ends up getting those 3. So very mixed as far as how it can end up being. But it is the most viable potion spamming thing that isn't flask currently, so it has that going for it. Aside from that, it has a little bit of score reduction. Also gets to do its condition, where it inflicts freeze when doing skull damage, so occasionally might be okay to use in first slot if you don't have any other freezer to end up utilizing with it on a particular team, so you can still get its freeze condition for the 50% extra chance, which you can do only if he's in first slot, or if he's the first most in your team. Technically, you can do it from any position if every other slot is dead in front of it. But he has to be up front in order to be doing these skulls specifically for the freeze. But overall, not bad, not insanely good. Flask's definitely better, but still has some uses, particularly heavily blue teams, and it does feed blue mana back into itself, so has that going forward if nothing else. We do have some extra souls if you end up using in PvP or Explore this week, not really too worth it compared to normal soul farming. But we do have 10% to all Khetar and 10% to all Undead, which is pretty good for a couple of the events this week, since they'll have perfect synergy with having those 20%, since there are quite a bit of overlap, because the event key drop table, of course, is Khetar this week. And with Khetar, there's a few okay drops. Overall, probably worth skipping if we go over to the Khetar faction right over here, or should I say kingdom, I mean. Every single thing that you see here is available, except for the 4 troops that are specifically the Fang Moor, which you only get from throwing shards at the Fang Moor faction. But everything else that you see underneath this section is indeed obtainable. Overall, nothing really much of a must-have. Keeper of Souls is okay. He's a really controlled skull spammer, but there's normally other things that you use instead. But a great option to mess around with if you ever really want a really heavy control skull build. Oddly enough, the common does that pretty well too, even though it's not used too often. I believe this is like the first or second time Pharaoh Nefertani has been in the event key drop table since she was released in Season 2. So, of course, we had Dustbringer finally available free to play the other week, so if you still haven't gotten Pharaoh Nefertani from Season 2 as well, you can end up getting her through event keys if you want to try for it. The other mythic being, of course, Farish Ra, which ever since Ironhawk and Nomapaloozas isn't really as useful anymore, mostly because you can soul farm a bit better there. Of course, soul farming is still a thing if you need souls in a pinch, so it's not horrible having that. However, Farish Ra is used pretty much entirely just for soul farming off his final trade of 150% additional souls, and it does, of course, stack if you happen to get multiple. So if you get like 2 Farish Ras while trying to get 1 Pharaoh Nefertani, it's not necessarily too bad, though of course that takes thousands upon thousands of event keys, so might not necessarily be worth it. And overall, probably a good week to skip, as nothing too enticing. Oh, also there's Apotheosis, good converter, convert and power into green skull spam, ends up working out pretty well. Very situational though, and the other one that does empower skull spam is a little bit better because it gives attack, whereas this thing gives life. But there are still instances where you use it, as well as using it with the other troop that ends up doing the Fist of Zorn, if not mistaken. But anyways, as far as the Word Law event this week, a little bit of a weird one, because we actually have spell damage. The reason why this is weird is Khetar is pretty heavy on skulls, so the fact that we don't have like spell and skulls, or just skulls, is a little off. Given that, well, yeah, spells don't really do as much. There are ways to build around spells, though. As far as the order in which you want to do it, Ultimate Doom of Ice is the highest priority, with the Haunted Tower being second highest, and then Bone Dragon being third. From there, you basically just take it based on rarity order. If you want it as simplified as possible, basically don't take Mummified King and do it by rarity order, and you're probably fine. Just say Mummified King for absolute last and just try taking it on rarity order, and you're probably doing the correct room in every instance if you just go by that, based on how they'll end up coming up. As far as what we're restricted to, it is specifically restricted to Khetar. Quite a few of these troops do have 20% bonus this week, as I click on 2 that don't. But quite a few things from Khetar are considered both undead, and obviously from Khetar, everything here is a Khetar troop, so they'll at least have 10%. So you can end up using a new Jackal. As far as weapons, you are restricted specifically to Khetar weapons, so if you end up picking up Dustbringer last week, pretty good option to be using for this week. However, if you don't have it, don't worry, because Creeping Death is basically the same thing for this event for the most part. You get this from 250 wins on the Necromancer hero class, which of course is the Khetar hero class. So if you just get 250 wins on that, if you don't already, you basically have a weapon that will effectively do exactly what Dustbringer will in this situation. Aside from that, trying to build around the Gauntlet could be okay. Most things here are undead, and every single thing that you would use here that is undead would have 20% additional stats. So if you set your hero class to Necromancer and just have a bunch of undead Khetars from your team, well, it's just a pure 20% additional bonus while also having the weapon, and that's a Soul Forge, so you can easily end up getting it this week as well. And those are pretty much the only 3 you'd really use for the most part. I guess you could technically get away with Doom of Ice, but those 3 are probably the main ones you'll be considering. Maybe the Khetar Shield, but Bone Gauntlet's normally better off. It depends what kind of coloration you end up going for. But any of these 4 pretty much, and maybe that though, probably not, especially since most people probably don't have the books maxed quite yet. Much better to get the full AoE ones maxed first. Overall, a little bit of a clunky one because there are so many skull spam options within Khetar. Like half the options here pretty much have something to do with skulls, but unfortunately skulls do not get an extra bonus, so most of those won't really be used. A couple of them you might be able to get away with, like Azurus for the extra +1 purple, but not really worth using most of them since you won't end up getting the boosted damage based on those skulls. So better just to go for some kind of AoE option, maybe a double AoE, and just kind of kill it out off of things that could just hit the entire enemy team. As far as other things that we got going on this week, this Tuesday we have the Fang Moor faction, of course, associated to the kingdom. Wednesday we're going to be getting the Skull Pet, which I believe is undead bonus, I want to say. Thursday we're going to be, I actually completely forgot off the top of my head. Thursday we end up getting the Necromancer class event. Okay class overall. Generally you end up using Archmage's hero class instead, as it tends to be better than it. However, it's still a pretty good hero class. Most noteworthy thing about it is a 50% mana cost with +1 purple that has the capability of killing the last enemy at 7% of the time, while also having a freeze utility. So there are instances where it is better than Archmage's, but more often than not, if you're just using like a big beefy purple weapon and you just want to get as much value out of it as possible, you're normally using Archmage's instead of Necromancer. But there are a few instances where it's not completely useless. So yeah, pretty good hero class. And if nothing else, get 250 wins, so you can go use that one weapon for the event. And then this Friday, we have a new faction associated to the Dragon's Claw. So we're going to end up getting that faction, and that should bring it to 20 star, I believe? 21 star, actually. So that'll be pretty nice. We'll end up getting, I believe, an extra armor off of that. Speaking of extra armors, one thing that this new troop does end up bringing in is we now have power level 20, which means we get 1 additional permanent armor from Khetar. So if you have absolutely everything from Khetar to get 20 stars, it is now possible to get a permanent armor as of this week. As far as Soul Forge, we have a few things that are kind of noteworthy. Let's start with the mythics. So as far as the mythics, there are 2 that are okay, neither are must-have. Quetzalma has quite a bit of yellow spam. Also hasn't been too many opportunities to get it free to play if you haven't picked it up yet from Season 3, I believe it was. But this thing's okay. Its final trait's a little bit weird because a lot of time you don't even end up getting to use it. It's kind of like an Inferno King, where he has a 20% chance to resurrect, but it does it with full mana. Big issue with this is it's such a low chance that most battles, obviously, you won't end up getting to utilize it. However, any time that it does happen is absolutely amazing. You're normally using it for its Yellow Storm into its ability that has the ability to constantly keep spamming yellow and ideally extra turning. It's not the most consistent infinite loop in the game. However, it can loop pretty consistently with various team setups, and overall isn't horrible. I don't feel like I use it too often, but it's definitely not a bad troop. Another one is Sycorax. This one is pretty low priority. Generally, I'm not a big fan, especially as you're progressing through the game, to bother getting mana accumulating mythics, mostly because there's so many good mana accumulating methods that aren't mythics, whereas most of the damage sources in the game are locked behind mythics and legendaries, so you normally want to focus initially on getting good damage sources out of higher rarities, since there are so many low rarities that can already do mana accumulation. However, this thing is pretty decent. It's very similar to all of the 12 mana cost troops that get to double a specific color onto the board. However, this one's a bit unique in that it gets to choose what color it ends up doing, while also also doing a bit of a life gain. It does suffer from having double the mana cost though compared to the other troops, actually a little over double. However, the option of being able to target anything is pretty effective on some loop teams, and he's used pretty much for that, just for some loop teams to kind of make them a little bit more infinite than they already are. Definitely not a must-have, but it's an okay troop to have in your utility to bring out for various teams on occasion. Aside from that, there's really only one legend I would say is really worth getting if you're going to bother to. It's not an absolute must-have. It's not one of the few I would say are worth getting as a legend, but it's good enough that it's worth mentioning. Yagway, he has a double hit that gets to do a magic steal, which is even more effective in early game. Also being able to transform all purple to red, which goes straight back into his mana accumulation. But anyways, as far as this troop, really good with Queen Titania, Yagway Queen Titania combination. Very strong. Main thing that ends up getting used for just with some kind of convert like Summer or Tapon or something similar. Ends up getting a lot of value, has life steal, has a lot of ways to ramp up his stats, and a lot of these numbers are static as far as his magic steal, his boost ratio, and his final trait, meaning that the earlier you get it, the more effective it is, so worth potentially considering. Aside from that, as far as legends, even though they're not too worth getting normally, if you want to pick up Winter Imp, this is normally only available from December and January. However, you can get it right now if you want to get it early. It is one of the only imps, actually the only of the 6 imps that is actually viable to use. Main reason for this is that it gets to, if an enemy dies, it gets to freeze all enemies, but it also does true damage and gains the exact same amount of stats as the other imps. All 5 of the other imps end up doing physical damage, yet still gain the exact same 8 damage. So obviously he basically gains double the value from gaining damage or gaining magic, just because he's doing true damage, which is directly hitting HP value, whereas all the other imps have to hit through their armor and then hit through all their HP, basically meaning, yeah, he's basically getting double the value from it. Still has the Warder Link to go into himself. Could be a little bit weird to try to use him, but it's definitely pretty strong. And of the imps, it's the only one that is even remotely viable to try to use. If you still want to collect them, while also getting a decent option for them. And aside from that, Nutcracker came out in December, so I think this is like the first or second time it's ever rotated in Soulforge, so somewhat worth mentioning if you didn't end up getting it all the way back then. It's not that good of a troop, but if you're getting it for completionist purposes, you can end up doing that if you didn't end up getting it last December. Overall, pretty underwhelming, but one of the somewhat more newer troops that are around here. Anyways, aside from that, as far as weapons, kind of already mentioned earlier, but picking up Dead Gauntlet could be okay. It's used a lot more than the other one because of the Undead bonus. You could get the Khetar Shield too, however the Undead bonus one is a lot more viable for team flexibility, because obviously this only works on Khetar, which limits your options a lot, even though it might be okay for the event this week. However, the Undead one is very versatile, as there are a couple kingdoms really focused on Undead that aren't just Khetar, such as Golvania, for example, and ends up getting value out of that. And aside from that, if you want to pick up the really annoying blue book for blue Guild War Defend team, it is available. Of course, it's a lot more effective if fully upgraded, and is pretty much only used for Defend team, but if you're really late in the game, you might want to pick it up, and maybe if Tower of Doom ever rolls back again, we will be able to get more things to actually level it up with. Or if they'll finally do something to fix that, because gosh, is it hard to upgrade the Doom weapons. And that's pretty much everything as far as viable pickups here. Anyways, so as far as teams throughout the week, of course, all in the description is below if you want to go and end up using any of them. For the Reward event, I'm probably going to be going with a all-in Dustbringer build. Probably going to try to utilize the new troop. They do have a backup plan if it doesn't end up working out too well. I was messing some with this. Not a huge fan of it, to be honest. Definitely much prefer using Flask, but it can sometimes do what it needs to do. This, of course, is being used in first slot, so we can end up using it for the freeze so that we can use Archmages to gain more mana. Basically, he gets his freeze, so he has a little bit of extra turn chance off of his ability. We have the Basilisk Scare just to do the convert here in order to go get us some purple. And we have the second AoE here, mostly just to back up the damage that we're already going to be getting off of Dustbringer. And kind of just doing that combination there and just keep spamming Dustbringer and Adcom. And just keep doing those two. As far as the cheaper version of this, you can end up doing it with Creeping Death. And just end up going with all epics and below. Creeping Death, as I mentioned earlier, you get from 250 wins on the Khetar hero class, which is the Necromancer. You could even just do it with the Necromancer hero class if you truly want to, as far as this build. But overall, you just basically keep spamming Creeping Death until you win. That's basically the premise of this build here, and you just keep doing that over and over and over again. And that's basically the premise. Basilisk still feeds purple, and the Azurus is mostly just here for the +1 purple that ends up getting off of its off its trait. So you can get even more purple on top of all the purple. As far as the Fang Moor faction, it is a red-blue restriction. For this, we can end up just going with a pretty standard Rowan team. Of course, you can use any colored weapon in factions, even if it's color restricted. So you can just kind of do standard Rowan team, and ends up working out pretty well. This ends up doing Drowned Sailor here just to convert into blue, which fills Rowan and possibly Mirage Queen if you end up needing it. As far as the pure faction, you generally go double Chief Dargon into Shaman of Set or Satori. You can end up going a few other options if you don't want to go double of the legendary. The main reason for going double of the legendary is you need to have at least one Chief Dargon survive to the final battle. So if you go Chief Dargon, Dragon of Set, and Satori into the final battle, you're pretty much good to go. So the reason for double Chief Dargon is mostly just a safety precaution in case one of them dies, because as long as you have these last three alive, you will be perfectly fine going into the final battle. So this first one, basically just a buffer that has some score reduction that will allow you to make sure that your final build is the three of them, and then you'll be good to go for pure faction. And you basically just keep spamming him, get your attack up. Ideally your first one if they're both still alive, obviously, because he does it to all himself and all below. So you want to use your upmost one and just keep spamming that. Shaman of Set doubles your red, and then you end up getting this for skull spam, which of course with your heightened attack while also having score reduction will end up getting a lot of value, and that's basically how you win, is you just attack buff like crazy, eventually get all your reds off of the Shaman of Set, and then Satori just keeps going and spamming until you kill them all out with your heightened attack damage. Pretty overall, okay pure faction. Not the hardest, not the easiest. Kind of mid-range. You do have a proper tank, but it doesn't really have a durability increase, which is the main thing that's holding it back, nor any resummon. As far as the Necromancer class event, pretty straightforward. You can just use a bunch of anything that has purple link. You don't have to use Azarus, is another one as well. But anything that has purple link in Khetar, I think there's like 2 or 3 options. Just use that, and though it specifically has to be a undead from Khetar. But just use that, and then do like a Black Manacles, Creeping Death, or really any weapon you want. And of course you could do Necromancer, you could do Archmagus. Really just depends which one you want to go. But if you still need wins on Necromancer and doing the event anyways for some Necromancer XP, might as well be using Necromancer to get even more Necromancer XP, especially if you didn't get the 250 win weapon yet, because it's not really worth buying it with gems. Never really is worth getting it that way. So just getting the 250 wins is a better option. And aside from that, this team I actually want to go use. So potion spam. Of course, now we have 2 things that can basically do potions now: Flask and Jakal of Guardian. Normally this team is used with a Zugoff in last slot. However, this makes it a little bit cheaper not having Zugoff. Quite a few mythics that you can end up using here, as well as legends. Basically any really good blue mana accumulation troop will be perfectly fine there. So any kind of legend or mythic that is really good with a lot of blues. This particular one, we're going down the route of Iron Gut. This will make it a little bit cheaper than going something like Zugoff or something similar, even though that's normally what's used in this kind of build. I figured we'd show it this way. So of course, similar premise to many of these. We just want to go and try to get our Thrall up as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, we do not have a power option in this particular team, so we are going to have to go and manually get a little bit of our mana. We're mostly just hunting for purple, and then we just auto win because Thrall. So we'll do that, and we're good to go. So be careful, this thing does have Impervious. Be careful of Imperviouses on opposing teams. So we'll just go get our Devour. You generally want to have your metal set to attack. I think I have it set to magic right now, which meant our percent chance to get that Devour was a little bit lower, though luckily it was enough to land it, so all is good. We took that potion before we took the extra turn just to make sure we'd have more blues on the board for a higher chance. Of course, the main reason for Iron Gut, as well as the reason why you normally have a Zugoff behind it, is so that you can end up getting a... well, Zugoff ends up handling anything that does have immune. But you can also end up getting skull spam and end up just getting really high skull value. So with this thing in first slot, we can just take any skull and then just boom, get a lot of kill up potential out of it. So like right here, we don't have the capability of devouring him, but it doesn't matter because we just take a single skull and he's pretty much just already dead. And then let's go for another Thrall here, and that should pretty much be matched. Just go for another Devour. They both have stealthy, so neither of them have stealthy. And then we just go for... oh, did we even get to use this troop yet? This team was supposed to be showing this troop, and it's like, oh yeah, we didn't get to show it. So right there, as you saw, he got his automatic extra turn, even though he didn't land an extra turn. As long as they're frozen, there's a 50% chance he gets an extra turn. That is not consistent at all, but we did indeed get it there. And let's take a little bit more mana, get a Flask if you can kill it at any point, but might as well get her a little bit of mana there, see if we can get another cast on him, see if he actually lands his extra turn. So we got pretty lucky. He did land his extra turn twice, so definitely usable. It's just not really consistent. We're getting pretty lucky this battle, but of course it doesn't always work out that way. Oops, as I take that for a non-extra turn. Normally want to use Thrall there, but it doesn't really matter. Let's just kill it. We're just stalling. And that's pretty much how the build goes. Overall, I would say the Iron Gut Zugoff method is a little bit better. However, if you don't have Zugoff yet, great alternative for it, even though Zugoff's easier to get than ever. It is still one of the hardest troops to get in the entire game, so Despite that, Jackal's a pretty good alternative to it that end up coming in this week, so you can still end up building teams kind of like the premise without necessarily needing a Zugoff to really help it. It would be better with Zugoff, but it's a nice replacement for if you don't have Zugoff, but you still get like Iron Gut early because you wanted to go do factions, and then you needed some kind of option to still make it work, so it kind of works out. Of course, this does lack in the one category of not being able to deal with Impervious and stuff like that, but the main way that you do it is you increase your attack and then just kill them that way. So it still has a way of doing it, it just, you know, it doesn't have Curse, it doesn't have anything like that to kind of deal like with, for example, Zugoff on this team. Wouldn't be able to deal with that in this particular matchup right here. But anyways, guys, that'll wrap it up for this video. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave in the comment section below. All of the teams that we just showed will also be in the description if you want to copy paste them and use them for anything this week. Anyways, guys, we'll be streaming tonight, as always, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going over all the Chapter 4 tasks and going from there. Anyways, guys, hope you all have a wonderful week, and I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye, everyone, and thanks for watching.